Hi there, this is Dan, and I got this great story for you, okay? It's like a Zen story, or, it doesn't have to be Zen, it's like a spirituality story. Or, what's popular nowadays, mindfulness. It's a story about mindfulness, okay? All right, so there's this guy, right? And this guy was like an investment banker or like a lawyer, one of those kind of scumbag jobs where you make lots of money, but you have like no ethics, investment banker lawyer. So this guy was an investment banker lawyer, and on weekends he sold used cars. All right. So this guy, he was like really rich, and he had lots of girlfriends and fast cars and stuff, but he wasn't happy. He wasn't fulfilled with his life. So he like got on the internet and started Googling, and he was looking up stuff about spirituality, and he found some sites talking about Zen or spirituality or mindfulness, and he found this place way out in the country. It's like a monastery where you can go and you take a vow of silence, right? So you become like a monk and you can't talk, and you have to give up all your earthly possessions. So like all day long you sit in a room with nothing but like a futon, and you stare at the wall, and then maybe a little walking meditation. So he says, "Hey, that sounds great. I'm going to go to this place." So he applies online using the internet. He pays the entrance fee with PayPal, right? And then he goes and he gives up all his earthly possessions, puts them on Craigslist and eBay, and gets rid of everything. And he heads off to this monastery in the woods, right? So he gets there, and there's a monk that is like introducing him to what's going on. And this monk, he can talk because he's like a guide or something. So the monk tells him, this place we take a vow of silence. You can't talk at all. But once a year, you get to go in and see the head monk, and you get to tell him one thing, okay? You get to say one thing to the head monk. So the guy says, "Yeah, that's cool. Sounds cool." So the guy checks into his room, and he starts, staring at the wall and being mindful and doing like walking meditation. He never says a word to any of the other monks there, right? Then winter comes, and then spring, and and then summer, and the whole time like he's just meditating and mindful, right? And so finally, a year passes, and the time comes for him to go and see the head monk, right? He goes to see the head monk. He can say one thing. So this the guy, I guess I didn't say what his name was, George. Let's say the scumbag investment banker, lawyer, used car salesman guy's George. Okay, so George goes to see the head monk, right? And he sits down, and the head monk nods his head and does this, and then George says, George gets to say one thing, and George says, "My bed is too hard," and the head monk nods, and then George leaves, right? So George leaves, and then he goes back to his room, right, and he stares at the wall. And then does walking meditation, eats his food in silence, and then fall comes, the leaves change colors, and then winter, and then spring comes, and the flowers bloom, and the whole time he's just silent, doing mindfulness and staring at the wall. And then more time passes, and finally it comes again, his time to go see the head monk, and he can say one thing, right? So George goes into the room of the head monk, and the head monk nods, come sit, and George looks, and the head monk says, he gestures because he doesn't talk, and George says, "The food here is terrible," right? And so the head monk nods, and George gets up and he leaves, right? So George goes back to his room, and then he sits down, he stares at the wall, yada yada. He does his walking meditation. The whole time he's silent, doesn't talk to any of the other monks. And then fall comes again, the leaves change colors in fall, and then winter starts snowing, and then spring comes and the flowers, right, and then summer, and then another year has passed. Right, the whole time George is just silent, and he gets to go see the head monk again, right? So he goes into the room, and the head monk, gestures to him, and George sits down, and the head monk is like, speak up, and George says, "My room is freezing cold," right? And the head monk nods, and go on your way. So George leaves. George goes back to his room, sits down, does the zazen, stares at the wall, does some walking meditation, eats his food in silence, studies scriptures, whatever. The whole thing is silent. So then, fall comes, winter, and then spring, flowers and birds. Then summer again, and now it's George's time. Another year passes, and it's George's time to go talk to the head monk, right? So the head monk, gestures him in. George comes and sits down, and then the head monk, go speak, and George says, "I can't take it anymore. I hate this place. I'm leaving." And then the head monk replies, the head monk, right? The head monk says, "Well, thank God, because ever since you got here, you've done nothing but bitch, bitch, bitch." He was silent for a whole year. He says, my bed is hard. And then he says, the food sucks. But the whole year he's silent, right? So he's not talking. And then he says, "Oh, it's cold." So the head monk says, "Thank God, you're bitching the whole time." You get it? Because he's silent. He's mindful, but he's bitching the whole time.